I just got back from a conference that talks about the way that we learn and how we gain and retain and recall information, the speed at which we recall it, and how we do it. And the whole time I was thinking about how this applies to personal projects. And so I've got like a whole like spiel. It's kind of a complicated thing. And so I went into a bunch of things, but if you just want the gist of it and then skip to the end where I talk about the thing, I'm going to give you the gist right now. Okay, so here's some notes. The more you know, the more connections that you have in your brain. The more connections that you have in your brain, the easier it is to learn the next thing, right? So if you have a bigger foundation and that foundation is connected and everything is kind of intertwined, then the next thing that you can learn faster and stronger. Explaining what you've learned helps solidify the reasoning behind that thing. And so being able to reason it out loud and explain it out loud helps you further understand it, builds greater connections and greater strength of those memories and skills and knowledge and whatever. The more you recall what you know, so if you pull out memories or skills or knowledge, the more you recall that thing, the stronger that thing becomes, the more information comes with it each time that you recall it, and the faster that you get at being able to recall that. That's pretty important. And then at the end, I talk about how knowledge is best sought rather than forced. And so if you're seeking knowledge because of creativity, then it's way better than having somebody force you to learn something. All of this ties into how personal projects and starting personal projects and sharing those projects publicly is super important and probably the single best way to learn anything. I'm going to get to that after the intro music, which will happen in a moment, and then I'm going to talk about the study for a long time, and if you want to jump to the end where I just tie it all together, then you can just jump into the little description in the video, and it'll have a time code of when you can go. But intro music, then lecture thing. The greater the foundational knowledge, the quicker and deeper we think. In other words, the higher order of thinking is dependent on foundational knowledge. People who have memorized lots of math can do higher levels of math, for example. People who have spent a lot of time doing anatomy studies and figure drawing can draw the figure better and more intuitively. Another interesting part of this is retrieval. Retrieval, the more we access or retrieve a specific thing from our long-term memory, the more we have access to it, and the more that comes with it. In other words, the more you recall a memory, or the more often that you recall a memory of an event and tell that story, the more surrounding information is remembered. The story is enhanced as it is told because each time you recall it, more of the original event comes with it, with that recall. And each time that you do that, the speed at which you can recall that information increases as well. Our brains work sort of like a computer. Your hard drive is considered like your long-term memory, whilst your RAM is your working or short-term memory. When using Photoshop, the application and its functions are moved to working memory, or RAM, where it can be easily accessed during use. The more we do this in our lives, the more important those things that we constantly recall into working memory become. In other words, our brain puts importance on things that are recalled more frequently, and each time we recall them, we improve our ability to access them in both speed and depth. Or, as neurologists like to say, neurons that fire together wire together, meaning that we are literally carving out deeper and faster paths to the skills, knowledge, and memories that we often recall. Two aspects of this come into play. One, spacing the learning over time, and two, retrieval practice. I'll come back to all of this in a moment when I tie all of this together, but I want to talk about another important aspect before I tie this all up. So another important concept is the connection network of ideas. When we first start out learning, we have little or no connection network. It's very small or non-existent. As we learn and internalize many new concepts, we begin to associate new connections between previously unrelated ideas. So imagine with me, if you will, that you move to a new town and you have a mental map of several areas of town. Then one day you take a new route from one known area to another known area, and suddenly in your mind it like morphs together, and those disparate areas in your mind are now connected. Your brain has learned the connection between those two things, and they become very related in your mind. both expanding your mental map of the area and increasing your ability to learn new parts of town. Whereas those that have little or no mental map in the area struggle in both speed at which they learn new areas and at the amount which they know about the area. Meaning, in other words, the greater your mental map of that area, the greater your ability to further learn more about that area and the speed at which you can do that. And so it is also true with the mental connection network in your mind on a subject. The faster you'll be able to add to it, and the better you'll be able to recall and use it. Experts call this a rich connection network. I'll come back to this again when I relate this to side projects as well. The third and final part about how our brain learns that I'll talk about today is motivation. It seems that the best learning happens when we seek out knowledge ourselves rather than other forms of learning that tend to be externally driven, forced upon us, or we have to because so-and-so made us, or some authority figure kind of pushes it down on us. The main driver of seeking tends to be curiosity. This is why you hear so many artists and writers talk about the importance of being curious about things. They may not know the neurological benefits of the science of learning, but they've recognized that being curious is a key trait to those that create. Curiosity can be piqued at the intersection of problems, questions, and challenges. Problems, questions, and challenges. When you can relate all three of those things, then you'll be at peak curiosity. So, for example, if you understand and care about solving a problem, if you ask yourself what you're trying to say and why you're trying to say it, and if you take on a challenge to do these things, then your curiosity will be piqued, causing you to seek out knowledge, which is the best state for optimal learning. One note on understanding and retention before I move on to tying this all in. Knowing and being able to articulate the why of things increases your ability to access skills and knowledge for a number of reasons. The most obvious is that it enriches your connection network because the why often relates to the previously unrelated. One of the best ways to solidify and understand the why of something is to reason it out loud to someone else. This is a key component of side projects that I'll talk about in a moment. But when I'm teaching design principles or illustration principles or composition principles to people, I will often have them critique each other. And it's not necessarily because they know what they're doing, but because in trying to articulate the why something is wrong or the why something is right, you are going to increase your ability and vernacular in that language, as well as increase your knowledge and connection network. For example, if you're learning a new language, your connection network on that subject is exceptionally small. But if you already know that language and somebody adds a new word or phrase or meaning, it's easy. You just add it and you don't have much of a problem. There's not much of a struggle. Your ability to increase that deep and wide understanding of that particular subject is already there, and it already fires often. Or if you know a language really well and then you go 10 years without speaking it, the importance in your brain is lowered on that particular subject, and so it's put into long-term storage, is not accessed easily and not learned quickly. So what does any of this have to do with art, writing, creativity, productivity, or personal projects? As I was listening to this lecture on the science and research surrounding learning, everything that he said related to the reasons and way that I suggest people do personal projects, or what I like to call side hustles. And I like to call them side hustles rather than personal projects for a number of reasons. But the main one is to hustle is a level of engagement that's different than a hobby. And a hobby or a passion project have a number of problems based on engagement. And so when I'm talking about motivation, when I'm talking about constantly producing, when I'm talking about being very engaged in something, hustle seems to better relate to those terms that put you in an optimal state of learning than other terms. You guys can use whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. But I have suggested for years that the best way to improve your art is to take on a side hustle. This should have three main components. One, it should be slightly outside of your comfort zone. Two, you should spend multiple days a week doing it. And three, you should share your work publicly and often. Interestingly enough, this seems to be the formula for the best learning. If you start a comic, novel, screenplay, series of stickers, a poster a week, a short film, an animated short, or whatever, you will trigger the necessary ingredients to engage your creativity, thus causing you to seek out knowledge and skills to solve the daily problems that your projects present. If you spread out the production of this work and it becomes part of your routine, then you'll avoid the downsides of cramming. Cramming is not good. Cramming is just like a test is about to happen and you put a bunch of information into your short-term memory, then you dump that information out and it's gone. It's purged and it never returns. It never hit long-term and it doesn't happen fast recall. It's just a short-term situation. So if you spread out the production of this work and it becomes part of your routine, then you'll avoid the downsides of cramming and gain the benefits of a rich connection network of ideas and skills, causing you to be able to more quickly recall and learn. Then, in sharing your progress out loud in a public setting, say a vlog or a podcast, you'll solidify the reasoning that you went through during the process, thus carving a deeper groove in your brain for that activity because you've recalled and articulated the reasons for the process that you went through. So you're making multiple connections and practicing recall. In other words, if I start a comic and come up against the problem of rendering the human figure, then my curiosity will be piqued because I have a problem and a challenge and a reason, and I will seek out the solution to that problem, study and practice to get better at rendering people, and eventually start to have a foundational understanding of the working parts and how they interact. With that foundation, I'll begin to notice more and more detail and expand on what I already know. All the while, I'm recalling all of this often as I draw more panels and pages, increasing the importance of that stuff to my brain, which causes greater connections and further increases my ability to learn more and expand my rich connection network on the human form. Then, as I explain my progress and process publicly on my vlog, I'll begin to verbalize and articulate the why of how all of these things work together, thus further solidifying the information in my long-term memory and increasing the number of connections in my networks, causing an increased ability to recall those things quickly and fully when I need them. In other words, starting a personal project stretches you. It makes you feel vulnerable, and working on it often and sharing it publicly causes connections both in long-term memory and in your ability to recall more fully. Not only will it give you the benefits of creation, but you'll be in the optimal situation to learn and grow as an artist. Ask anyone who has spent a couple years consistently producing art if they agree with what I've just said. In fact, share this video with them and see what they think. I'm curious on what you guys think about if any of this learning in research and science of how we learn relates to the personal projects that you guys are doing or the personal projects that you're planning on doing. All of this is to say that if you want to get better at something, challenge yourself, start a side hustle today, do it often. And in doing that, you will put yourself in the optimal state for learning, and you will significantly increase your abilities, skills, and ability to recall information that you've learned and learn new information. If you want to check out stuff that I've done, you can go to CoreyKerr.com. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram and comment here on YouTube and Facebook. And we will catch you guys later. I'm out.